Good morning, and welcome to the Arvada Chamber of Commerce Third Friday Issues Breakfast. We have a wonderful crowd this morning and a very interesting topic, and so we are so glad to have you with us this morning. As is our tradition, may we begin the morning with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Oh, thank you so much. We do that so well. There's a rumor going around that that some legislation was passed making marijuana legal in the state of Colorado, is what we hear. And so we thought, what the heck, we might as well talk about it this morning as a topic of conversation, and to kind of add to the fun and the mood. You all notice you have a double chocolate brownie thing here, just and this just so that you know, these brownies are made with TLC. All right, just wanted to kind of get that straight. But we thought it would add a little flavor to the morning. And after all, chocolate is one of your major food groups, so we'll have a healthy breakfast. And thank you, John Irvin, with gluten-free things, for bringing them this morning. That's very nice business, and we appreciate that. Thank you. This morning, as you know, City Council is going to have to make a decision how they want to handle the sale of marijuana within the city of Arvada, and they will be making that decision coming up shortly. And it is an important, momentous decision, and so we wanted to get as much information out as we can. This morning's program is meant to just shed some light on the very broad implications of this law. What we'll have is a small sample of the kind of information the City Council is going to have to consider in making that decision. The Chamber has not taken a position on this issue, nor will we, as far as I know. The opinions offered by the panel members are their personal opinions that they are sharing with us. And and as we mentioned before, just so that you know, we are this program, we are experimenting with different formats and different ways of doing this breakfast, and so keep your eyes and ears open, and we appreciate. At the end, we'll appreciate any feedback that you have on how we're doing. And for those who are going to be watching this on KATV, we really would like your input also. Now, before we start, so that you have a little perspective from the City Council point of view on what they're going to do and how they're going to do it, and the input that they're looking for, Mayor Mark Williams, please come up and spend a minute and let us know.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for everybody for being here. This is an important issue. And a question was asked of me before we started. Now, wait a minute. Can City Council be here today and hear all this? And the issue on that, let me put on my lawyer hat for a minute, is that City Council sits in two different ways, either quasi-judicial or legislative. Quasi-judicial was like the highly controversial Walmart decision. And we had, everybody that came to us, we had to say, wait a minute, please don't talk to us about this. We can only consider what we hear in the public hearing. That's not true with legislative. I see Senator Zinzinger's in the audience here today, and she knows that when you're in the legislative end of things, people come and talk to you around the corner all the time. And that's what's going to happen on this issue as well. So it's good. I've got several council members that are here. I see Mr. Marriott, Mr. Marks, Mr. McGough. It's great to have them here so that they can hear this public input and consideration. We will be conducting a public hearing. We will consider all information submitted to us. And then we will make a decision. And our options are, we can either extend the moratorium that's in place right now. We can say, yes, we're going to allow sales and grow operations in the city of Arvada under certain regulations, or we can say, no. We can say, no, we do not want grow operations. We do not want retail operations. There's some various ranges within that we can certainly consider. That's the decision City Council is going to make. It's great that this constitutional amendment maintained local control. Local communities can decide what they think is best for their community. So with that, I'll turn it over to the program and let it all proceed.
Thank you, Mark. To begin with, and to give us a broad overview of the issue, we've invited Randall Sampson, who is from the City Attorney's Office, to spend a couple of minutes, actually 15, and let us know what the broad implications of the legislation, or the for lack of a better term, and then we'll get to our panel members. So, Randall, come on up.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I feel very comfortable in this room. I notice the colors of the walls are the colors of my bedroom, so I'm very comfortable here, although somewhat sleepy. Anyway, I've got a bit to say in 15 minutes, so I apologize in advance if I anchor myself to my notes and speak more quickly than I should. But with that, my understanding is, again, my role is to be something of a preamble to the panel this morning, a preamble in the way of where Arvada's been, where we are, and where we may be going. And with that, let me launch into that history. As you all know, Arvada shares its early history with the experiment that is legal marijuana with everyone else in Colorado because of the passage in 2000 of Amendment 20, which provided an avenue by which people with certain debilitating conditions and their primary caregivers could lawfully use and grow small amounts of marijuana on a doctor's recommendation. After Amendment 20 was passed, we had a period of some quiet, followed by what I would consider a period of great confusion and controversy and contention as dispensaries all of a sudden started popping up all over the landscape, including one in Arvada that went out of business early on. Those dispensaries purported to be, quote, primary caregivers under Amendment 20. And what followed were efforts on the part of many municipalities to close down those dispensaries because the dispensary didn't fit any land use category on the books. It wasn't expressly authorized in Amendment 20. Following those efforts were countersuits by the dispensaries, efforts by the Board of Health to pass rulemaking. The feds weighed in a little bit. The Court of Appeals in Colorado tried to define primary caregiver. So out of all of that, I think there was, it's fair to say, a consensus that there needed to be a legislative fix. That occurred in, I believe, 2010 with the passage of House Bill 1284 that essentially did legalize the business model for medical marijuana businesses and cultivation facilities, infused products, manufacturers, et cetera. But it expressly allowed municipal authorities to ban those land uses within their community. Arvada passed a moratorium, as did many cities, and studied the issue, watched it unfold, watched regulations develop, et cetera. And ultimately, in June of 2011, Arvada passed an ordinance, 4270, I think was the number of the ordinance, that banned the medical marijuana businesses within the boundaries of the city of Arvada, along with setting some regulations with respect to patients and primary caregivers in the growing of medical marijuana. Those provisions are codified in Chapter 53 of the City Code, along with the prohibition on medical marijuana businesses. Next, we find the new chapter is Amendment 64 in November of 2012, in which we ramp it up as Coloradans and pass what amounts to the legalization of small amounts of recreational marijuana, both in terms of using it, possessing it, and growing it on a private basis. The drafters of that amendment took cues from their experience with medical marijuana and made sure that the amendment also specifically addressed a business model for recreational marijuana. That's the retail marijuana store, again, the products manufacturing, the brownies, if you will, and testing facilities and cultivation facilities. So that was passed by the voters. Again, that specifically allows municipal governments to prohibit those business models, those land uses, if you will. Not the personal use. That's a vote of the people that we want to legalize the use of and the growing of small amounts of marijuana on a recreational basis. The land use was a different matter. It specifically authorizes municipal governments to prohibit the business model, if you will. We being the city of Arvada, city council actually, adopted a moratorium in March of 2013 that was extended in July, I believe, of 2013. It expires the end of next month, March 31st. So some action, one way or the other, will be taken in the coming weeks. That moratorium, again, was to allow this to play out a little bit, to see what the state legislature did. And by the way, they, of course, passed House Bill 1317, among others, last year that put some flesh on the bones of Amendment 64, if you will. Again, we're set to take action here in the coming weeks. Before I get to staff's and let me say, what's scheduled for March 17th by way of a vehicle to bring the issue forward is an ordinance that would prohibit marijuana stores, cultivation facilities, testing facilities, and products manufacturing within the boundaries of the city of Arvada, consistent with its action previously on medical marijuana businesses. Before I get to the staff's reasons for that ordinance and that recommendation, let me say I think it's important to emphasize the distinction between personal use and land use, both in terms of what the vote on Amendment 64 meant and where the city or any community might want to go. The voters directly voted on the question of personal use. The amendment, however, which they also voted on, says municipal governments essentially can make the decision as to whether or not the business model, not the personal use, but the business model, the stores, should be allowed in one's jurisdiction. So consistent with that distinction between personal use and land use, there's been a number of cities, and you probably are aware of that, who, while the voters approved Amendment 64 in their jurisdiction, the city council has determined it most appropriate within their community to ban the business models, the land uses. Westminster would fit into that description. Thornton would fit into that description. Colorado Springs, a number of other cities. All right, quickly running through staff's recommendations. Let me emphasize again, these are staff's. I'm trying to summarize staff's position. It's not the position of council. Council will ultimately decide this after the public hearing. I'll give you two as a package, the first two together, because I think they highlight a similar critical point. One, the use, possession, and cultivation of marijuana remains illegal at the federal level. It's a Schedule I controlled substance. Whether one believes it should be or not, that's the reality today. And two, staff's opinion would be that it's premature to introduce into the community land uses that have been illegal for decades, remain illegal at the federal level, and for which there's been very little opportunity for hard evidence to accumulate over time as to the impacts socially, in terms of public safety, in terms of health, in terms of economic impacts. Very little time really has passed to allow hard evidence to accumulate on those points. So those two reasons alone, I think, highlight the uncertainty with which we live, the environment in which this marijuana experiment unfolds. Some of those uncertainties. What will the feds ultimately do? Well, they've taken a relaxed approach, right? Everyone knows that. They've stepped back, but the law remains what it is on the federal books. There will be a change of administration, we all know. President Obama, having served out his 2 terms in less than 3 years and a little over a couple of years, there will be a change of administration. The federal government has listed 8 priorities, or what you might refer to as triggers, that could cause them to do a quick 180 and intervene again in the issue. Some of those triggers are diversion of marijuana to states where it's illegal, distribution to minors, public safety consequences such as drugged driving. And you don't have to Google on the internet long to find articles showing anecdotally evidence that some of those things are occurring. Whether they will amount to enough in the scale, so to speak, to tip those scales and have the federal government intervene, we don't know at this point. Other uncertainties, what will be the effect on the medical marijuana system that's up and running? There's 110,000 roughly people registered on the state registry as patients. The cost of getting an ID card has plummeted. It's $15 now. I think it started at maybe 85. I thought it was well over 100 originally, but in any event, it has plummeted over time. It's less costly because there's less taxes typically imposed in the medical end of things. What will be the impact there? Will that system expand, or will it contract as people, decide, well, I can just get it recreationally? There's been calls already for greater oversight on the doctors who make recommendations within that system. One of those voices, I believe, being Chris Romer, who authored House Bill 1284 a few years ago. So we don't know the impact there. We don't know the impact on public safety. There's already reports of increased citations of driving under the influence of drugs in Washington state that also legalized recreational marijuana. You might have seen a CBS This Morning segment just Wednesday morning on the testing of the marijuana products in Colorado. There's only 3 certified labs at this point. Testing is voluntary until October. Only 7 to 10% of the product providers are having their products tested right now, and the labs are finding E. coli, mold, mildew. What will be the long term? Will that settle out? Will we have a safer, better product? Again, we're kind of in that very early stage of uncertainty. Bottom line, great uncertainty invites caution, I think, and caution would suggest here there's more potential downside right now than upside. And that plays again into staff's opinion that prohibition at this point in time is what's appropriate. Quickly running through a few other underlying reasons for our recommendation. Prohibition maintains the status quo in Arvada. The citizen survey suggested in terms of livability and quality of life, the status quo in Arvada is pretty darn good. While everything can be improved, the status quo seems pretty darn good. That's an environment that's been free of marijuana businesses, not personal use again, but marijuana businesses, whether medical or recreational. Prohibition of recreational marijuana would be consistent with the earlier action prohibiting medical marijuana businesses. There's no such thing as a permanent moratorium. The population of communities under a moratorium will continue to shrink, so some action will need to be taken, and staff feels the timing's appropriate to bring some closure to this issue. Those cities having taken more permanent action, either to regulate or to prohibit, there's about 112 as of, I think, late January. And of those 112, 76%, 85 communities, I believe the number would be, chose to prohibit the marijuana business model as a land use within their community. 24%, 27 communities chose to regulate. And finally, and I'll wrap this up, that intangible that I might call a community's culture, I think is an important consideration. If you, with the exception of the urban center of Denver, the city and county of Denver itself, and a few notable exceptions, one being our neighbor immediately across I-70, Wheat Ridge, and a couple that might be represented in some sense on the panel this morning, with a couple of notable exceptions. When you look at those communities that are regulating, most of them cluster around 2 categories: mountain ski or casino communities, Blackhawk, Central City, Breckenridge, Telluride. Let me rattle off a couple of other names. Crested Butte, Frisco, Aspen. Or they are communities that, for lack of a better term, have a history of a certain laid-back policy making or politics, and that's not a disparagement, but that's Nederland, Carbondale, Aspen again. Neither one of those categories, in staff's opinion, really characterize Arvada very well. The communities that are prohibiting are a more diverse lot. There is Western Slope communities like Montrose, Eastern Plains communities like Fort Morgan, and then a sizable core of Front Range communities, Brighton, Broomfield, Colorado Springs, Greenwood Village, Longmont, Parker, Superior, Thornton, Westminster, that staff would suggest Arvada probably has a lot more in common with in terms of demographics, constituency characteristics, revenue sources, and policy making and history. Finally, to wrap it up, this really is not an issue of one community being regressive or reactionary on the issue of marijuana and another community being progressive. We're all, if you think about it, cutting edge right now. We're all experimental because each one of us can go home tonight and legally smoke marijuana or tend to our marijuana garden or eat a marijuana-laced brownie. So it's not a question of being reactionary or progressive. It's an issue of engaging in wise policy and land use making decisions. And that, of course, depends on that culture of a community, that decisions that kind of fit the history and the feel and the culture of a community. And that's going to vary from one community to the next. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Randall. Give us a base of knowledge of where we're going. And so as he says, basically we're all lab rats to the federal government at the moment. And so we want to be the best lab rats we could possibly be, I guess. So with possibly, and I'm going to call on the panel, and please come up when you're called upon to speak, and I'm going to kind of call on everybody randomly. There's a huge, broad array of information and different opinions, and no real logical order. So I'm just going to, as it appears appropriate, call on them. So let me now ask Bruce Granger, as soon as I introduce him, to come up and give us a perspective. Bruce is a marijuana advocate, and he's going to be discussing the road to legalization and the pros of having retail marijuana in a community. Bruce was born and raised in New York City, moved to Colorado in 1974. Was in the production business for 25 years, doing all kinds of different projects with films and documentaries, including the grand opening of the Denver Public Library. Now involved in the city of Denver and the state and the legislative endeavor that got us to where we are with the legislation, and is currently a partner in Kind of Love Medical Marijuana, shop located in Southeast Denver. So with that, Bruce, thank you. Please come on up.
Thank you very much for letting me talk today. Again, my name is Bruce Granger. I own a dispensary in Glendale, Colorado called Kind Love. I got into this industry, I've been consuming this product for 40 years. I'm a severe arthritic. I'm an ex-ski racer and had a horrible accident in 1968. And they had suggested I start consuming barbiturates and opiate drugs and NSAID drugs, and at 16 years old, this all made me so incomprehensibly stupid, I couldn't take any of them, and a friend of mine said, oh, try this pot. And sure enough, it stopped my leg from twinging, and I could sleep at night, and I've been consuming this for 40 years. As a matter of fact, when I called my 78-year-old mother and told her that I was getting into this business, she said, you mean the 40 years of research is finally paying off? And it has. The store that I opened up, I decided to open it up with one thing in mind, and that was addressing the elderly and seniors. And so we market to those individuals. My average age in my store is 48 years old, and we deal with very severe situations. I have over 10 patients under the age of 10 years old. My youngest is 16 months. She was having on average of 10 grand mal seizures a day. We are down to about one every 3 or 4 days. We use a very high, just to give you all a background, so marijuana, people know of one thing about marijuana, and that is THC. THC is the only psychotropic cannabinoid within marijuana. There are over 80 different cannabinoids within it. There's about 22 different terpenes and about 16 different flavonoids, all within this one plant. Out of all of that, there's only one thing that makes you stoned or high, and that's THC. The Israeli government has been doing research into this plant for about 30 years. About 20 years ago, they identified another cannabinoid called CBD or cannabidiol. Cannabidiol is a very effective anti-inflammatory, antispasmodic. And so we have spent the last 3.5 years trying to develop plants that have very low THC, very high CBD, and as the gentleman with the attorney's office here alluded to, the testing, we test everything we sell. We're one of those few stores that do, and we just developed a plant that has 17% CBD and half of 1% THC. We use this plant to do microdosing for these children with great effectiveness. To me, people get high whether or not they drink, smoke marijuana, do prescription drugs, and the beauty about this plant is it's almost impossible to overdose. Yes, people go into the hospital with what they call overdosing. All it is they're nervous, they're scared, and they're experiencing something they've consumed too much, typically from eating, and they're very nervous and they don't know what to do. They go to the hospital, and basically the only thing doctors can do is hydrate them. They give them Ringer's lactate, which is nothing more than sugar water, and get them hydrated, and they end up leaving no worse for the wear, except they got very nervous and very scared. I'd also like to address the fact of my legislative background. I've never been involved with politics in my life until I got into this industry, and as somebody alluded earlier, Chris Romer was one of the founding fathers of 1284, which was our original legislative law. I was involved with him. I've been involved with the state legislation for the past 4 years. I know everybody on Denver City Council. I talk to all of them. I participate with their process. And I think it's very important that people be educated as to the medicinal values of this product. I was not in favor of the recreational aspect, as somebody else alluded to. The federal government, this is still a Scheduled I drug, and I believe that what we need to do is educate the population to the effectiveness of this as a medical product and get the federal government used to that before we ever get down this recreational path. But this is the state of Colorado, and we elected Amendment 64 and passed those laws, and here we are. I am right now interested in, Aurora is going to change, they've banned medical marijuana, and they've chosen not to ban recreational. They're going to start recreational applications in July, and I'm going to probably go into Aurora, but I'm going to stay with my medical aspect. I'm going to market myself as a medical store. I'm not really interested in the recreational aspect of it right now. As far as what Arvada may choose to do, and I appreciate the city's stand on it, but I think all municipalities have to look at also the fact that we're really not creating a lot of users, and what you've got here is an opportunity for another income stream. The taxes that were generated by the first 7 days of recreational marijuana in Denver amounted to almost $1 million in taxes in the first 7 days. That's not something to sneeze at, something I think that the City Council needs to look at as well. I think the issue of the police department. I'd like to, when I opened up my store in 2010, the first thing I did was I went down to the police station and talked to the chief of police. I introduced myself, and I wanted to ask him how he felt about it. And I don't know how many of you know Glendale, but it's a very sort of transient town. And he said to me, look, about 80% of our people who live here are transients, and we get a lot of disturbing the peace calls. And the first thing we hope for is that we're walking into a party with a bunch of stoners and not a bunch of drunks. Because the bottom line is, drunks, especially, I'm sorry to say this, gentlemen, drunk adolescent men tend to want to fight. And the first thing that they'll want to do when a cop walks in is fight with them. Unfortunately or fortunately, people who smoke marijuana are relatively laid back and they don't want to fight. And so from just a pragmatic standpoint, I think that there is a benefit to look at, and I also feel like we have to figure out a lot of other issues, for instance, the driving issue and what we can do to make sure that people don't drive stoned. I see that my time is almost up. I'll be here when this is all over if anybody has any questions, and I certainly would like to talk to the legislative branch of your city. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Bruce. Next, I'd like to bring up Jake Stratton. Jake is with Staffscapes to discuss the concerns and the laws as how they relate to how you do business in a marijuana distribution business. And Jake as I said, is from Staffscapes, which is a professional employer organization, works closely in the employment process with small employers that include things like developing systems, policies, procedures, documentation, and planning for small businesses. He's a published writer, accomplished speaker regarding business operations, legislation, human resources, payroll, and for our purposes this morning, government mandates. So with that, Jake, please come on up.
Thank you. Thank you guys for your time. This is an exciting topic. It's fascinating. It's always been fascinating since this actually first kind of started raising its flags for us. One of the things I wanted to first start with is, again, you know, what I'm going to talk about is more on the employment side. You as an employer, how do you handle this? You know, now that we're recreational, not only medicinal, but recreational now legal, how do you handle that as an employer? The good thing that we have going for the state is very much like what Randall explained and what the mayor said. We can choose, and on the employer side, we can choose as well. So individual cities can decide if they want to allow these here by land use. It's still legal to use, but you can decide how you want to handle it here in Arvada. That's great. The other great thing is, on the employment side, as far as it goes right now, the way that case law is, we're allowed to decide for ourselves as an employer if we want to allow this or if we don't want to allow it. Because again, it is still illegal on the federal side. Now, there is two different aspects to this. We're talking about medicinal, we're talking about recreational. Again, like Bruce was talking about, there is a difference between the two. There is a difference between the two in the write-up of the legislation, too, and the laws. And I was going to give that to you just so that way you understand what it says. So on the medical side, that's underneath Article 18. It's on the employer side, employment side, it explains, nothing in this section shall require any employer to accommodate the medical use of marijuana in any workplace. So that's our clause that we can use, that we can say, look, we're not going to allow the use of medicinal marijuana in our workplace. That's going to be up for interpretation. There's a court case right now that's been going through since, I think, 2012. It's Coates versus Dish Network. You guys might be aware of that. It went through the lower courts. It's gone through the Colorado Court of Appeals, and it's still been upheld that the employer can terminate even if it's based on a medical marijuana situation. However, the Supreme Court of Colorado just decided earlier, just a few months ago, that they are going to take a look at it. It took them a little while to decide that they were going to take a look at it. I think they, once we passed this recreational side, I think there's started becoming a lot more of a push for them to look at it and to really make a decision and a determination on this. However, we can go back right now also to case law out of California, out of Washington, out of Oregon, out of a lot of the western states out here that have it. And again, they have upheld that it is the employer's right to not allow this in their workplace. So with that, let me get back. Let me explain Article 64. Now, this is the recreational side. So Article 64 says, or Amendment 64, I apologize, says nothing in this section is intended to require an employer to permit or accommodate the use, consumption, possession, of marijuana in the workplace, or to affect the ability of employers to have policies restricting the use of marijuana by employees. That one to me is a lot more clear. On the recreational side, it very clearly says that you as an employer can have policies restricting the use of marijuana by employees. That's not saying in the workplace, that's not saying anything else, that's saying use by employees, you can restrict it. So again, this Coates case that's out there right now is specific to medicinal marijuana, medical marijuana. That might change. We might be here at the end of summer when they actually come out with their determination. We might have to change our gears and say, no, we have to allow the medicinal side of things, and how are we going to draft our policies to allow that? Right now, though, we do not have to do that. Okay, so I want to let you guys know on the employer side, you can make that determination. It's a great thing. You should be comfortable. This is what I like. I like that the cities can determine that. I like that us as employers can decide, do I want to allow this or do I want to not allow this? Every employer out there is different. And how I operate my business is going to be different how somebody else operates their business. So some areas, it might be acceptable where you're going to allow the medicinal side. You might even allow the recreational side. We actually have clients that allow both. We also have clients that also restrict it as well. And I personally think that's a good benefit to us as a community to be able to decide that. So what do you do then? How do you decide how you want your policies to be written, how you want to draft this? It really is going to depend on you. It's going to depend on your business. It's going to depend on your company. There's a few things to think about, and there's a few things to look at. One, what is your interpretation, or what is your thoughts about marijuana? Do you want to restrict it because you're the owner of the company and you just don't agree with it? You can do that right now, and that's fine, and that's how you draft your policies. One of the other things to think about is are you doing any federal contracts? Are you doing any business with the federal government? Do you have to abide by federal regulations? Do you have any kind of driving restrictions or anything else like that where you have drivers out there? That's going to be DOT. That's going to be federal again. So anything that's federal based, you're going to say that's nice and easy. You have to still continue to follow federal law. This is still going to be, it's still a Class 1 drug. Even on the medicinal side, it's illegal, and you still need to test for it, and you still need to terminate for it. Anything beyond that, though, if you don't have any of this federal restrictions or federal contacts or contracts or anything else, you can decide on your own. So there's a few things that you need to think about and look at. What are the different liabilities, and what are the benefits? What is your employee structure? Are you in an industry that's generally a little bit more open to this? More of the arts? Are you into IT, where if you want good employees, you're going to have to be a little bit more lenient? Or do you have some safety-sensitive type of business that you're doing? Are you in construction? Are you in things where you have to worry about people that might be intoxicated at work, where they could harm either themselves, other employees, or the public? So there's a lot of things to think about. The other thing to think about, too, is product liability. Are you doing sales outside of the state of Colorado, and you need to my time's up, so I apologize, but are you doing business outside the state of Colorado where your product liability, your service liability, you might have an issue now because they know that. So thank you for your time. I'm going to be up here in the panel. If you guys got additional questions, please let me know. I'll be here afterwards too as well. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Jay. Thank you so much. One of the difficult issues facing Colorado and facing people who are in the marijuana business, and is a public safety issue actually for everybody, is the current banking regulations that are federal that do impact a lot the marijuana business. And so we have with us this morning Leslie Oliver from Congressman Perlmutter's office, who is working on this problem. Leslie is the Policy and Communications Director for Congressman Perlmutter. She's a graduate of the University of Colorado and the University of Denver's Sturm College of Law, and has a great background in this particular area. And so with that, Leslie, please come on up.
Good morning. I think, can you hear me now? Is that better? Okay. I think we have all kind of alluded to the conflicts that exist between federal and state law. And Colorado and Washington state are sort of on the cutting edge of this experiment, as we've been talking about this morning, and are the two states that have legalized adult use for recreational purposes. Washington's going to begin implementing their rules later this summer, or they're rolling out their businesses, I guess, later this summer, and Colorado is already well into the first couple of months of this experiment here. That being said, there are 20 states plus the District of Columbia that have some form of legalized use, whether it's medicinal, recreational, what have you, and there are several more states that are lining up to do the same, and they're kind of watching what's going on here, kind of watching what's going on in Washington. But states like Alabama, Georgia, are also considering some form of very limited legal cannabis consumption. You know, a lot of it's to treat the epilepsy problem that we've been hearing a lot about in the past few weeks. So what our office is doing is what we've heard from, especially here in Colorado, from both small businesses, the marijuana industry, as well as the financial industry, is there's this knot, if you will, that prevents the businesses access to the banking services. Because marijuana is still illegal at the federal level, it's a Schedule I drug that's prohibited. Most of the banking institutions are, well, really all of the banking financial services institutions are subject to some sort of federal regulation. And they're not allowed to provide banking services. So this means you can't open a checking account. You can't get a loan. You can't process credit card transactions, the swipe transactions. So it makes running a marijuana business cash intensive for all purposes. And when you do that, there are some inherent public safety risks. You're ripe for robbery, you're ripe for assault, money laundering, trafficking, all of these issues, as well as the accountability side from the municipal government side of actually collecting the taxes. And if you're running a cash-only business, maybe you report some of it, maybe you don't report some of it. And, so we've heard all of this, and, we've also heard that the businesses, they can't pay their customers, because if you are or not your customers, your employees, if you are a cash-only business and, you've got somebody that's working the front counter or working in your grow operation or whatever it is, you're paying their salary in cash. Well, then those individuals are taking their paychecks, their pay bags of money, if you will, and they're trying to pay their bills, their mortgage, their rent, their electricity, and they can't necessarily do that in cash. And so it's got these ripple effects all down the line. It's pretty complex problem. And we've heard from law enforcement, we've heard from municipal governments, we've heard from state leaders that there's just, nobody's been able to figure this out. And, there was the idea floated of the state, of maybe we do a state chartered bank, so we're keeping everything under, state control. We've heard about maybe trying to use Bitcoin, all these new technologies. Is there some way around this so that you can remove this from the federal regulatory system? And there have been a lot of really smart people working on this, and nobody's been able to figure it out. So as kind of, where we got brought into it is Ed sits on the Financial Services Committee in the House of Representatives. He's kind of the one member of the Colorado delegation that's in a position that can take on the financial piece of it. Representative Polis is looking at it from other perspectives of just exempting states that have a legal structure from the regulatory, if states have a regulatory structure in place, they're exempt from the Controlled Substances Act. What we're looking at, we've got a bill that's got about 22, 23 co-sponsors, a bipartisan group of legislators that specifically addresses the financial system. So it basically says for financial institutions in states where there is a legal framework for the adult use of marijuana, those financial institutions are protected from criminal and civil and regulatory liability. So if a banking regulator comes in and says, X bank, we notice that you're taking money that's from a marijuana business, they're not going to get fined simply because they provide services to the business. So that's our bill. We've had some guidance that came down recently from the federal government, from Justice, and from from Department of Treasury that addresses some of the issues and offers some financial institutions some certainty and some guidance. But there's still a need for the legislation because banks and financial institutions still have the choice of whether this is an appropriate business model for them. Do they want to make the decision to provide services to these customers? It's still a risk. They're not legally able to do it under federal law. Maybe, people turn the regulators and Justice turn a blind eye to their being able to do it, but maybe not. And so that's why we still need the legislation. We're working with the industry to try to figure all of that out, and my time is up, and I'll be here for questions. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Leslie, for perspective from the federal side. And I'm sure we'll be hearing a whole lot more from Congressman Perlmutter as things progress. Wayne Dodge is a city councilman from North Glen. And so we thought it would be nice to have some perspective, get some perspective from other communities who are also dealing with this issue. Wayne owns a company called Dodge Sign Company that he started in his garage, much like Hewlett-Packard or the Ramones. So we expect him to be resembling either one or the other. And proud to have you with us. Wayne is very active on a lot of boards and commissions, committees. The company is a major supporter of the schools and does a lot of work in the community and has a really good perspective on how North Glen is dealing with the subject. So with that, Wayne, please come on up and share some thoughts with us.
Thanks for having me. We started our business about 31 years ago. You said in the garage and struggled for a couple of years and got moving and got into a space right away about a year later and survived as a company over the last 31 years. It'll be next March, which is pretty cool. And when I bought the building back in 2006, the guy that owned the building all that time, built it and stuff, wanted to get out of the business of it and stuff. So I ended up buying the building, and then the economy kind of crashed after that a little bit, and owed a lot of money. And so tough story at that point. I was owing about $13,900 a month and didn't have it. And so I got approached by some dispensaries to come into the building at that time. So I interviewed about, and I don't think you were one of them, but over 50 dispensaries. And kind of picks and choose and knocked my way down and everything, and talked to the attorneys I have. Should we do this? The Fed issue? Can you lose the building? Do you still owe the money if you lose the building? Do you lose your business? I mean, I was afraid of everything. And so I talked to my wife, talked to my kids. My kids are well informed about marijuana and alcohol and prescription drugs. And I mean, I think that's the main thing, is that good parents control what's going on. There's always, if it's not marijuana, and I think you alluded to this, there's alcohol, there's prescription. Right now, I'm fighting off a kidney stone. And so first thing they do when you go into Kaiser, they're injecting you. So I've been doing that, and they hand you a prescription on Percocets and stuff, anything you want. So, so it's out there. So you have to work with your kids. I think good parents control a lot what's going out there. So, long story short, I had the tough time and everything. So I talked to the guy that I owed money to, and luckily I didn't owe a bank money. It was a private lender that I owed $1.5 million to, and said, what do we do with this? I can't keep paying every month. The chance I could do is I could have high rent with a dispensary in here, and I could be paying every month and stuff. And came back with a guy said, if something were to happen, the feds came in, I would walk away from the loan. You don't owe anything. So that kind of made my decision up after talking to everybody. I mean, like I said, I talked to my wife, my kids, my dog listened to me. Everybody did. So it was. That was a rough time. So we did that. We moved, and I interviewed probably close to 50 places and stuff, and some not as, that frightened me a little bit when they came in. I was afraid of the people. When I saw them face to face, I was afraid of the people. I enjoyed meeting 4 or 5 of them were very businesslike. I had other ones that came in and wasn't from our city, surrounding cities. They showed me photos how they filled the whole basement with plants. They're growing everything. When they pulled up in the van, opened up the door, and a Budweiser can fell out, and I thought, these guys aren't my guys, and stuff. And but that's just showing you what's out there. So it's in every city. People are growing. In Arvada, I'm sure there's people growing in Arvada also. So I made the decision. I brought in the best that I thought was the best of the best and stuff, and they've been class acts that I've had in there. Shortly after that, I ran for council. All the neighborhood, everybody knows me. We've been there for 40-some years now, living there. And everybody kind of knows me. I never knocked on a door to run for council. My wife sat on council at the time, thought it's not a much chance running against 4 other people to run for council. Everybody knew that I had a dispensary in my building too. Well, I still had 74% of the vote. People still elected me in there without knocking on a door. So that meant people trusted us a little bit. So we moved along and kept things running as a business pretty good with a dispensary in there. Before I brought them in, I also talked to the PD, asking about what type of things. I went on the internet before Northland allowed any dispensaries. What's allowed, what's not allowed, what's the crime rate was huge for me. And so after I got elected, I had Northland do a secondary research on what crimes are around dispensaries, and they have their 8 points of crime, and I wish I had a list of them, but it's auto thefts and break-ins and armed robbery and assaults, and it goes on, but there's 8 points of that. And around dispensaries, actually, in their 2-year study that they did, crime actually remained the same or dropped around dispensaries. And around our place, crime has dropped, of course. My biggest problem used to be was people dumping a refrigerator on the weekend, a couch this weekend, and occasionally a kid throwing a rock through the window and stuff. Well, right now we don't have that. We have 18 cameras. They see everything. They're all knowing, They call on my phone if something's going on, and they can call the PD if something's going on. I mean, so technology is just increasing all the time. Some of the cameras on site with the technology is they actually move with you. As you move, they zoom in and move with you as you're walking through the property, so which is pretty high tech and everything. So I feel pretty safe about that kind of things, and so that's a decision I made. Now, Northland actually went to retail, and I don't know how much time I got left, but they actually got 2 minutes left. They went to retail last year when I was on council, and we have 4 dispensaries. 1 never opened. So we actually have 3 viable dispensaries. Last year, they brought in about $300,000 to the city, so nothing great, but for our little city, it's worth something. 2 of the stores have now went to retail. The one next door to me has stayed medical at this point, and they have a different crowd, of course. I've been over to the other retail ones to look at it, what the crowds they have, and the crowds that we have, their statistics that they have is 40% of their customer base coming into the dispensary next to me are women between ages 40 and 60. A little bit different crowd. Then when you go to the retail, you tend to see more people 25 to 35, 45 in that age group. So a little different crowd from medical to retail and everything. So on that aspect, what else was I going to talk about? And then this year, my goal, I thought we were going to have 4 retail shops in Northland. I thought we were going to make $1 million this year. and it didn't look like we're going to do that at 2 and everything, but we've had an issue around the schools, and that's why I was trying to earmark money from dispensary to go towards the schools. Last year we had 3 children hit by cars in the school areas, and I'm sure with everyone else's schools, they don't bus kids anymore. Kids don't walk there anymore. Parents drive them. So where you had 20 vehicles coming in and 13 buses, well, now you have 300 cars coming into a school. And that meant kids are crossing the thing. So our repair on that, we figure, is a little over $100,000 per school we have. We have 12 schools, a little over $1 million. We don't have that. So my thing, if we made $1 million, I wanted to earmark that and go. And I'm having a little resistance on that, but I'm hoping that if we can get that money, that we would invest it right back in the school areas for the safety of the children. So something that's not favorable for everyone turns out to hopefully do something good in the neighborhood. The safety on that, and then also my thing, I talk about the bar level. I'm running out here. Bar level of what the businesses are allowed in Northland. If you're a business in Northland, I'm sure it's Arvada, same way, you're at this level. You have to be an upscale business to be around here. But if you're a dispensary, and I'm running out of time, if you're a dispensary, a liquor store, or a pharmacy, the level is up here. You need to be up here, and that's the standard we want to set. So, and thanks for your time. I'd be glad to be around here and answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Wayne, for your perspective. And we have, finally, from the City of Edgewater, Councilman Christian Teagarden, who is, sits on the Edgewater City Council, has experience working with the First Judicial District Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee as an at-large council member, working with Communications Corrections Subcommittee, Child and Youth Leadership Commission Prevention Subcommittee, and Wheatridge Business Association Board of Directors, and other things that he does for the community with a very interesting and broad perspective that is a bit different than our other panel members. And so we are really honored to have Christian with us this morning. Please. Come on.
Thank you for inviting me today. My name is Christian Teagarden. I am an Edgewater council member. So, marijuana. Interestingly enough, our retail marijuana is open January 1st, and Mayor Bonnie McNulty and I were sitting in our new business, Dunkin' Donuts, on a Friday, and watching the long lines from our retail store and Dunkin' Donuts running back and forth, buying donuts, and going back to the line. So I don't know if that was planned or not, but Dunkin' Donuts did a great job with their soft opening. So, and we looked at each other and we said, is this surreal? We never thought this would happen in our lifetime, especially I didn't think it would happen in my lifetime, but it has. And so now we have to deal with it. So I'm just going to speak a little bit about what we did on council and then some of the other ramifications when we're talking about criminal justice issues and substance abuse issues. Surprisingly enough, we did not regulate this a lot through our municipality. The state did such a good job of regulation that most of that we allowed the state suzerainty over our regulations in the municipality. We did not want to overlap, and we did not want to create double laws. So our retail law is pretty skimpy because the state has regulated, and we didn't mess with our medical marijuana either. The two major components of that law is that we put the marijuana retail licensing under our regular business licensing. And also, if you are growing within Edgewater or have a permit or you're making marijuana, that you have to sell to a dispensary or a retail marijuana shop in Edgewater. So it's kind of that homegrown thing. So, pun intended on that one. You know, and it was interesting because it was an amalgamation of more of a liberal values of treating our social acceptance of what substance abuse is and our libertarian values of not over-regulating things and creating more laws that aren't needed. So We had everybody on the bench. It was more or less consensus. I didn't even say a word. I just sat over there kind of stunned because it went so well. And we had a great staff and attorney to work through what was going on. So we were happy to be the guinea pigs in Jefferson County. And the major thing that we have seen with the lines is litter. And so the chief of police walks the line. The lines have dwindled, but telling them to pick up their litter, so they've done so. We've also been partnering with the schools to make sure that we are out in front of this to see how much is proliferating through our communities. We don't know exactly. That's a big question mark. But the one thing is that at least we can be there when things happen, one, to document it, and two, to try and be preventative with substance abuse with our kids, because we don't want any of that. Going over on the criminal justice side, is everybody aware that the state rewrote their drug laws and statutes? So they're focusing more on the dealers as opposed to just the users, and substance abuse unto itself being treated more as a public health issue. Does substance abuse lead to criminal activity? It sure does. Nobody's going to deny that. But substance abuse unto itself as something that is treatable, so people can get sober and go back to work or not be in the criminal justice system. One thing that I would really like to stress is I was at a community corrections retreat about 3 or 4 months ago. And we had 2 county judges in Jefferson County talk about one of the problems that they were having, heroin addiction. So a lot of these kids, and they're 18 to 20-year-old, 21-year-old kids in the suburbs. These aren't street kids. They are seeing full-blown heroin addicts at this age. And what happens is they get pharmaceuticals, whether that's Percocets, whether that's Xanax, whether that's Valium, what have you, muscle relaxers, painkillers. Then they run into OxyContin. OxyContin is a pharmaceutical. It's very powerful, and it's very expensive, and it's hard to get. So when they get hooked on that, they turn to mainlining. So then they get hooked on heroin. And the scary thing about this drug is the judges said these kids want to quit, they want to get off the drug, and they send them to rehab. They do all the things that are in front of them that they can do for these kids, and they go right back to using. So I think that is an important issue as we go forward. There's been a couple overdoses in the past 2 or 3 months on that, and I'm not trying to take anything away from marijuana. Statistics will come. Everything else will start, coming in, and we'll be able to have a little bit more balance on evidence and practice. But Edgewater, at the end of the day, we are a hardworking neighborhood. We go to work, get up, and we go to our pubs and hang out. Some folks go to the dispensaries, buy their weed, and go home. And obviously, we don't allow that on public property or out in the community. What you do in your own home or on your porch is your business. We as our government don't feel that we should go on your porch, on your property, and say you can't smoke marijuana, unless maybe you have a 10-foot bong going down your steps, and maybe we'll talk about it. So I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. My name is Christian Teagarden. I'm an Edgewater Council member. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Christian. Yeah, I know personally I decided to leave my bong at home this morning. So Cammie told me I had to. No, just, of course, kidding. Questions. We have a couple of minutes to take a couple questions to anybody on the panel, or any comments that anybody has. Bob.
Yeah, I understand with the state taxation, the state progressive use tax, that is designated, what, first 40 million is for schools, perhaps the best program. With the retail, with the city municipalities, do you designate that? Is there a law that says you shall use the first whatever for whatever?
I guess it's towards one of us then. I'm always wanting to earmark money, funds from this or anything else to get something to paid for and everything like that. But a lot of our council, as I call it, the black hole, page 8 and 9 in our budget, they want everything into there and then distribute from there. So right now, everything does go into the general fund, and I would like to lead that forward. In March, end of March, we'll know what our quarter returns are for retail, and from there, then we'll make, I'm hoping I can push this through that we earmark it exclusively towards the schools. That would be my #1 goal, if we can have that happen.
In the schools would be better traffic signals or infrastructure.
Safety, yes, yep.
Other questions? Mr. Leverage?
This past week and a half, I've been involved in a property that I initially was called to because they said there's some leaks going on in the house. It's a rental property. And I found the roof to be in good shape. I was concerned about the ventilation because the attic was full of moisture, and so often that can be an issue. But it was excessive moisture, and I'm going, gee, what's this coming from? And they wanted me to start working on the ventilation for them. And I was talking to a friend of mine about it, and he said, gee, what have they got, a grow operation going in there? And I'm not one who's around this stuff much, but a light came on. Gee, that could be a possibility. And so I kind of weaseled my way in and found an excessive big grow operation in the basement. I've seen pictures of this before, but I've never witnessed it. I haven't seen a marijuana plant before, so I was a bit in shock. And so the humidity from what they were creating there was destroying this house. They came here, they're Cubans that came from Florida 3 months ago, set this up within that period of time. And this house has probably $50,000 to $60,000 worth of damage to it. How would a city address something of that nature?
Well, first of all, I can tell you that I don't know how many plants they're growing, but
Get the mic.
I don't know how many plants they are growing, but bottom line is a city municipality can regulate the number of plants that any one individual can grow under the caregiver model. It sounds to me like, well, first of all, when you're growing this plant, the humidity levels can get very high. In my operation, I have probably over $5,000 worth of dehumidification in basically 3,000 square feet of a commercial grow facility. So, you're adding about a gallon of water per plant every other day. It is astronomical. And my personal belief is that, first of all, houses aren't designed for the constant electrical load that the lights are putting on the system. So that needs to be changed, I believe, legislatively, as well as you alluded to, the mold and mildew issue of high humidity within a home. It was never designed for that. So these are things I think that local municipalities can regulate. Denver has allowed for under the caregiver model for a caregiver not to have more than 5 patients or a total of 36 plants at any one grow. So it can be legislated that way.
Well, the sad thing, they thought, these guys were claiming that they're legal because they have a medical marijuana license. Nobody knew that they were doing this, and yet they caused immense damage. And who's going to pay for that? The insurance company is going to pay for it. They're just, I saw just tons of problems related to this. And you say the humidity was high. The basement felt like a sauna to me. The first floor of the house was 60% humidity.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it was, and that house is destroyed.
Yeah, thanks for that perspective, Bob. And by the way, Bob has a really great picture of also on his Facebook page. So couldn't miss that opportunity. Sean, good.
City council members and Councilman Bruce, if you could let us know, is there any studies or any information that's available to let you know what kind of economic impact it's had on local businesses where you do have legal marijuana facilities in the area?
Well, for my building, as I said, 60% of my building was vacant when they first came in, and now I actually have a waiting list for people that want to move in near them, of course, because of the traffic and for medical especially, those people tend to have disposable income. They tend to spend money. So now I have a microbrewery that moved in real close to them in the building because same thing, they're feeding off of that. So for me, it made a difference in the building. Will it continue that way? I just don't know. You know, I take every day as it goes, but I've enjoyed that we filled our building back up and I'm back on the straight and narrow of paying my mortgage. So it has made a difference of that. And like I say, I have a waiting list of people that want to come in.
Also, I can tell you that in Denver, there was a huge vacancy rate when it comes to warehouse space. There is none anymore. If you're looking for warehouse space in Denver, it's almost impossible to find. And the lease payments that these landlords are asking from the medical marijuana industry is probably 30 to 40% greater than they would get from anybody else because they recognize that they feel that they're putting themselves at some minimal risk, I believe. Right now, I mean, 4 years ago, I think the risk was high. Now I think when the feds came in a year and a half ago and closed down about 47 dispensaries because they were within 1,000 feet of a school, instead of coming in and, you know, ripping them down, they issued them letters, and they had 45 days to close, and every single one of them did within the time frame that the federal government asked them to do.
Okay. Christian?
Foot traffic is up. Right now, we are projected to highly gain. Basically, because we are the only municipality west of Sheridan, besides Wheat Ridge coming on that has allowed this at such times. With our medical marijuana, over the 3 years that we have had it, we saw quite substantial gains in taxes. And as of last year, we had an excess of $140,000 in tax revenue, and we bought 5 police cruisers with that. Our old police chief never liked to say that. We got new cars for weed money. So, however, with Super Walmart being open in Lakeside, our target took a hit. So we're not going to be able to see a lot of huge increases because a lot of the marijuana tax is going to backfill what we lost with tax revenue. But at least with foot traffic, we've seen a lot, and not a lot of crime coming out of that at all. You know, just the litter, the Hostess, and Cheetos bags rolling down the street. So,
Okay, great. Thank you, Christian. One more question?
So, being from the financial services industry, I'm fascinated to know how the owners are dealing with the fact that you can't go to a bank and deposit this money. So how do you make this work practically? How do you pay your bills and how do you pay your taxes?
Well, I'll just answer that real quickly for myself. I've been in Denver for 40 years. I have a very good relationship with a bank here in town, and I currently do bank. I also accept credit cards in my store because, like I said, I've owned 3 other businesses before getting into this industry, and the bank just trusts me. At the end of the day, I think they have minimal risk. If you go back and look at history, at the end of Prohibition, there were tons of speakeasies, and there were banks that accepted speakeasy money at that time that was illegal. None of them ever got prosecuted for doing that. I think right now banking is a very, as everybody knows, a very conservative industry, and they're taking a very conservative view at this. I think that we just have to prove as an industry, both at the state level and as the federal government, that we can do this effectively and legally and be good members of society. So yeah, there is banking opportunities. You just have to prove yourselves to the banks and be, I think, a legitimate business.
Okay, great.
And I'll just jump in real quick too. I think with last week's guidance that came out from some of the regulators and from Department of Justice, I think it will allow some financial institutions, some more financial institutions, to make the business decision to go ahead and start providing services to the businesses. Again, it's a decision that the banks can make, and as Bruce noted, it's a inherently conservative group of people, and that's a good thing. Banking should be conservative, but we are hopeful that at least in the short term, until we can get some more concrete laws allowing for the, certain certainty for the financial institutions to do this. We're hopeful that some banks will develop that personal relationship and make that business decision that it's good for their business. It does provide added public safety and accountability features. And that's what your business wants. That's what the majority of the business owners want. And it could be a good financial model for the financial institutions themselves. So, we're working it on a few different levels.
Thank you so much, and thank you, panel, for being with us. Extraordinarily valuable information, and